Magnus Carlsen is devastated in only 19 moves. Magnus Carlsen is undoubtedly one of the best chess players who ever graced the game. Between his world championship title and that of the chess grandmaster, he also has a 125-game winning streak. However, what do you think will happen when a former chess grandmaster decides to come out of retirement and challenge him? Before we continue with our video, a reminder that we know you love watching these videos, so remember to click on that like and subscribe button. The new challenge in front of Magnus was none other than Judit Polgar. The Hungarian-born Judit was widely considered the best female champion ever to play chess. And why should they not? After all, back in 1991, Judit became the youngest chess grandmaster at the age of 15 years, breaking Bobby Fischer's record. Her rating of over 2,600 points is still considered one of the best in chess, and although she retired in 2014 after a stellar 26-year career, she decided to come out of her retirement to play a 3-minute blitz matchup with Magnus Carlsen. The last time Magnus had played Judit was in 2014, the final year for the Hungarian on tour, and he had decisively won over his opponent back then. Judit was designated white and began the play with her trademark beginning. She moved her pawn to e4. Magnus replied by moving his pawn to c5. This beginning meant that both players aimed to secure the all-important central squares. Polgar continued the tempo by moving her knight to f3. The position gave just enough space for her to develop her knight. Carlsen continued on his pawn game and pushed his kingside pawn to c6. The significant knight move meant that Judit could protect the central squares from any attacks by Magnus with his instruments. Judith then moves her queenside pawn to d4. Now this was a widespread move by the Hungarian, and it is something that she had used against various opponents in the past, including against Magnus in the meeting in 2014. However, things were much different with her now than when she lost to her Norwegian opponent. This time she didn't have one but two amazing tricks that would decisively change the game's flow in her favor. The game continued as the players kept developing their pieces. There was sufficient tension in the air, and it was boiling down to a showdown between two greats of the game. Judit decided to take out her pawns and appoint important positions. Magnus opted to bring out his knight to a significant development position. The difference is, the Thai monarch is usually way more offensive, allowing for bombastic gameplay. We are going towards an exciting showdown. However, remarkably, Magnus seems to be very relaxed. He wasn't even focusing entirely on the board and seemed to have everything under his control. Like so many times in the past, did he underestimate his opponent, or perhaps his confidence was well recorded? Did you like the video up until now? Then pull out your hand to like the video and make a move to checkmate the subscribe button. Magnus decided to place his queen at c7. Judith, too, seemed to be interested in using her queen in open play and moved her to d2. The position meant the queens were activated and could be used whenever necessary. Magnus then decided to bring out his knight into position, as the development of the knight is crucial to the side's success. It was still advantageous for white at this juncture, as they had held onto a really solid position. Even more, Judith was marginally ahead of her opponent because of the effective utilization of pawns. She had created a perfect defense of pawns, as the ones on the e4, f3, and g2 work are placed such that they work together, protecting each other. However, Magnus decided to take things to the front by placing his bishop out in the e7 square, hoping for a clash with his opponent. Polgar responded by coolly castling her king. The position of castling ensured that her king was in an extremely defensive position. As the game shifted to the center squares, the time had become ripe for the first exchange of minor pieces. The first exchange that everyone was waiting for occurred at the d4 position. Magnus decided to trade a knight for a knight. While the trade regarding the powers lost was equal, the battle began to tilt slightly in favor of Carlsen. The reason was that the white knight was in a dominant position right in the center of the board, and trading the piece with the same amount but at a poorer location, Magnus had managed to stall his opponent's relentless attacking for a while. Carlsen then moved his light bishop to the e7 position, aiming to launch an attack right at the center of the board. The aim was to regain the part of the d4 and d5 squares to begin dictating the play. The move meant that he was not threatening the pawn with two pieces. Polgar at the junction did something that no one had expected, something that would start tilting the course of play in her favor decisively. This was her first plan to handicap her opponent. Judith drove the pawn that was being threatened forward. Now, not only had she managed to relieve the threat on her instrument, but she had also set up an attack on the knight of Carlsen. The tables had turned decisively in her favor as the knight was caught up in a poor position. Nonetheless, Magnus decided to move his knight forward, which Judit wanted. Little did Carlsen know that his act would eventually force his knight into an extremely poor position. Another attack by a pawn meant that Carlsen had to retreat his instrument back to the h3 square. That's a corner square for ya. A knight in such a corner square is the worst thing to happen to a particular piece. Why is this so? This greatly limits its movements as it is at the board's edge. The knight is technically out of play and can do little to affect the proceedings in the center squares. This position was so bad that even Carlsen was compelled to accept it. The move by Polgar had shaken up the entire game. At that time, it is uncertain if Carlsen knew the end game had already started. Polgar then quickly moved her light bishop to the center position in 2 steps, first to d3 and then to e4. The e4 part meant that she threatened the white bishop of Magnus even though he had a rook behind him. Polgar had played her turn wisely and a pawn protected her from attacking the bishop. At this stage, Carlsen made his first major blunder of the match. He moved his rook to the c8 position, enforcing his threatened bishop. One important point at this juncture was that Carlsen had taken an incredibly long time before proceeding. In blitz chess, time is a rarity, and it's obvious that he was under extreme pressure now. Things had gone well beyond his reckoning. The move gave Judith the killer move that she was waiting for. Judit moved her dark bishop to the b6 position. Now she's threatening the queen of Magnus. If Magnus were to take out the bishop, who was unprotected, Judit would force checkmate in one simple attack by her queen. A move to d7 would render the game over. Magnus had no option but to sacrifice the queen. Right after that, he made an equal trade of bishops, but things were no longer as they were a few moments ago. The ball was in Judit's court, and Magnus knew he was badly trapped. While he could have gone down fighting, the power difference was too much to reckon with. The difference between a queen and a practically useless knight rendered the game toothless for Magnus. Eventually, he gave up despite not being checkmated. That's how Judit Polgar avenged Carlsen for her loss in 2014. And with that, this video comes to an end. We hope you loved watching it, because if you did, why not subscribe to us for more? We'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep watching Chesstics.